Ladies and gentlemen, when history is written, there are moments that stand out not for the noise they create, but for the silence that follows them. One such moment has just shaken the foundations of global politics. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, delivered a statement so chilling, so precise, and so unflinching that it left not only former President Donald Trump, but the entire Western world in shock. This was not just another diplomatic exchange, it was India's reply, and it was thunderous in its clarity. For too long, the West has spoken to India as though it were a subordinate, a country to be persuaded, pressured, or lectured. But those days are gone. In his measured yet powerful words, Jaishankar made it clear India is not here to take instructions, India is here to lead, to decide, and to chart its own path. His statement was not about defiance for its own sake. It was about dignity, sovereignty, and the unshakable principle that India answers to no one but its people. What shocked the West most was not just what Jaishankar said, but how he said it. Calm, deliberate, without raising his voice, yet each word carried the weight of 1 billion people who refused to bow to foreign pressure. Trump's comments may have been designed to provoke, but India's response revealed something far greater: a nation that will not be provoked. A nation that speaks with authority, and a nation that knows exactly where it stands. Let us be clear, India's reply was not just to Trump, but to a mindset that assumes Western powers can dictate terms to the rest of the world. That mindset was shattered in an instant. With one chilling statement, Jaishankar reminded the West that India is no longer a silent participant, but a decisive player in shaping the global order. The days of lecturing India are over, the days of listening to India have begun. Why was the West so shaken? Because they saw in Jaishankar's words the reflection of a larger truth. India is rising, and it is rising on its own terms. It is building alliances but not dependencies, partnerships but not subservience. It is open to cooperation but closed to coercion. That balance of power, firm, confident, and unapologetic, is what terrifies those who believed India would always stay in the shadows. Trump's remarks may have been bold, but India's response was bolder. It was not loud or aggressive, but calm and chilling, a reminder that true power does not need to shout. True power speaks once and the world listens. That is what happened here. The West was left shocked because it realized that India has crossed a threshold. It is no longer reacting to world events, it is shaping them. It is no longer waiting for validation, it is demanding respect. India's sovereign response to former President Trump, as articulated by External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, is a defining moment in the nation's diplomatic history and a clear signal of its growing global assertiveness. For decades, India was often perceived as a nation that needed guidance or approval from Western powers in matters of foreign policy, economic strategy, and even defense decisions. This perception was not entirely unfounded, as India navigated a post-colonial world dominated by Western influence and often relied on international partnerships to strengthen its economy and security. However, the global landscape has shifted, and India has undergone a remarkable transformation. Today, it is not merely responding to external pressures, but actively asserting its sovereignty, demonstrating that it will make decisions based on national interest rather than foreign expectations. Jaishankar's statement embodies this shift, serving as a firm reminder that India is no longer willing to be lectured or coerced by any foreign power, regardless of its political stature or global clout. The importance of sovereignty in India's response cannot be overstated. Sovereignty, in its truest sense, is the capacity of a nation to govern itself without external interference. For India, asserting sovereignty means the ability to make strategic decisions, whether in defense, procurement, international alliances, or trade negotiations, based on the welfare of its citizens and its national priorities. Jaishankar's response was carefully crafted to reinforce this principle. By addressing Trump's remarks with calm authority, India demonstrated that its foreign policy is guided by pragmatism and national interest rather than emotional reaction or external pressure. This approach signals to the world that India's voice in international affairs is independent and must be respected as such. Historically, the West often expected compliance from countries seeking engagement or support. But India's position marks a departure from this dynamic. In his statement, Jaishankar made it clear that India will collaborate with other nations on mutually beneficial terms, but it will not compromise its autonomy. This distinction is critical because it emphasizes that India's diplomacy is not reactive or submissive, it is proactive and self-determined. By asserting this sovereignty, India not only protects its national interests, but also sets a precedent for other nations that may have previously felt compelled to acquiesce to Western demands. Furthermore, India's sovereign response has strategic significance in multiple spheres. In terms of defense, for instance, it allows India to procure technologies, weapons, and partnerships that strengthen national security without being beholden to American approval. Economically, it enables India to engage in trade agreements and international investments that align with its development priorities, rather than being limited to deals favored by the West. Diplomatically, it allows India to maintain balanced relationships with a diverse set of countries, including those that may have strained relations with the United States, without fear of reprisal or coercion. This multifaceted approach highlights the practical benefits of asserting sovereignty, showing that it is not merely a rhetorical stance, but a framework for tangible national empowerment. Symbolically, the sovereign response also carries immense weight. For a nation of over 1 billion people, the message that India stands firm on its principles resonates deeply both domestically and internationally. It reinforces the image of India as a confident, self-reliant country that is capable of engaging with the world on its own terms. This, in turn, enhances India's credibility on the global stage, signaling to allies and competitors alike that its decisions are rooted in strategic calculation rather than external pressure or intimidation. Ultimately, India's sovereign response to Trump represents more than a single diplomatic statement. It is a culmination of decades of strategic planning, economic development, and geopolitical foresight, demonstrating that India is now a nation that acts independently, decisively, and with authority. This assertion of sovereignty is not just about countering a specific remark, it is about affirming India's position as a mature, self-determined actor in world affairs. It conveys a powerful message that India will chart its own course, set its own priorities, and respond to the world from a position of strength rather than compliance. India's calm yet powerful diplomacy, as exemplified in Dr. S. Jaishankar's response to former President Trump, marks a significant evolution in the nation's approach to global engagement and reflects a broader shift in international relations. Diplomacy is often misunderstood as a matter of rhetoric or ceremony, but its true power lies in the ability to communicate authority, resolve, and strategic intent without resorting to aggression or bluster. Jaishankar's statement was a textbook example of this principle. Delivered with measured precision, it conveyed India's position firmly while avoiding any unnecessary escalation, demonstrating that true strength lies in composure and clarity rather than in loud or confrontational language. This approach not only surprised the West, but also redefined the way India's diplomatic power is perceived on the global stage. One of the reasons this form of diplomacy is so effective is that it commands attention and respect without provoking fear. The West, accustomed to responses that are either deferential or confrontational, was unprepared for a reply that combined calmness with unassailable authority. Jaishankar did not shout, threaten, or issue ultimatums. Instead, he spoke deliberately, allowing each word to carry weight. This style of communication demonstrates a profound understanding of power dynamics. Strength does not always need to be loud to be acknowledged, and measured statements often have a far longer, lasting impact than impulsive or aggressive rhetoric. By choosing this route, India positioned itself as a mature, confident actor capable of handling sensitive situations with strategic finesse. The calmness of India's diplomacy also signals a level of internal confidence that cannot be manufactured. Nations that are uncertain, dependent, or insecure often resort to bluster or aggressive posturing to mask vulnerability. India's approach, however, reflects a deep sense of self-assuredness built on decades of economic growth, military modernization, and geopolitical foresight. By remaining composed in the face of provocation, India demonstrated that it does not need to react impulsively to external pressures, and that its decisions are guided by calculated national interest rather than emotional impulses. This not only reassures allies but also serves as a subtle warning to competitors. India is deliberate, strategic, and fully in control of its actions. Moreover, the measured delivery amplifies the impact of India's message. A calm, authoritative response forces the listener to pay closer attention, because each word carries intentional weight. In this case, Jaishankar's statement forced the West to confront a reality that had often been ignored. India will not be coerced, lectured, or manipulated. The subtlety of the delivery meant that the message was difficult to dismiss or undermine, and it left no room for misinterpretation. By employing calm diplomacy, India demonstrated that it can assert itself effectively without creating unnecessary conflict, making its position simultaneously strong and credible. The strategic implications of this approach extend beyond the immediate exchange. Calm and powerful diplomacy allows India to maintain influence in international negotiations, build alliances, and shape global discourse while avoiding entanglement in unnecessary conflicts. It enhances India's credibility because other nations recognize that India speaks with authority but does not resort to reckless provocation. This credibility is a valuable asset in today's multipolar world, where respect and influence are often more effective than coercion or intimidation. By demonstrating the effectiveness of composed diplomacy, then India is setting a standard for how emerging powers can assert themselves globally without adopting aggressive or domineering postures. Furthermore, calm yet powerful diplomacy strengthens India's domestic position. It signals to citizens that their leaders are capable of handling international challenges with poise and intelligence. Then it fosters national pride by showing that India can assert its sovereignty and global interests without resorting to unnecessary theatrics or conflict. Then, this balance of strength and composure becomes a model for leadership, reinforcing the perception that India is a nation that thinks strategically, acts decisively, and commands respect both at home and abroad. Ultimately, India's calm yet powerful diplomatic approach in response to Trump is more than a single moment of political brilliance. It is a reflection of the country's growing stature, strategic maturity, and understanding of global power dynamics. It demonstrates that true authority is expressed not through forceful words or aggressive posturing, but through measured, deliberate communication that commands attention, respect, and influence on the world stage. India's challenge to Western mindsets, as illustrated by Dr. S. Jaishankar's response to former President Trump, represents a pivotal shift in global perceptions of power, authority, and respect. For decades, Western powers, particularly the United States, have operated under the assumption that their economic, military, and political dominance allowed them to dictate terms to other nations. Countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America were often expected to conform to Western expectations, adopt policies that aligned with US interests, or comply with strategies imposed by the West in exchange for economic or political benefits. India's rise, however, challenges this long-standing mindset. By responding decisively, calmly, and independently to provocation, India is signaling to the world that Western assumptions of obedience and influence no longer hold, and that emerging powers can operate with autonomy while still commanding respect on the global stage. The West has long relied on its perception as the standard bearer of global norms and the ultimate arbiter of acceptable behavior in international relations. This mindset assumed that economic leverage, military superiority, or strategic partnerships would naturally result in compliance from other nations. For India, this assumption was never entirely accurate, but in practice it did create constraints. Nations often navigated complex diplomatic landscapes, carefully balancing Western expectations against domestic priorities. India's recent diplomatic posture, exemplified in Jaishankar's statement, disrupts this dynamic by asserting that decisions will be made based on national interest rather than on appeasing or aligning with Western pressures. This assertion directly challenges the Western mindset that dominance can translate into unquestioned influence. India's approach demonstrates that strength in the modern world is not solely measured by military might or economic size, but by the ability to exercise sovereignty, strategic foresight, and principled decision-making. By calmly but firmly responding to Trump's remarks, India communicated that it will not be manipulated, coerced, or lectured, regardless of the speaker's position or stature. This represents a paradigm shift in global diplomacy, where the West is forced to recognize that respect must be earned, and that power cannot automatically translate into compliance. India's rise, therefore, is not just a story of national achievement, but a challenge to entrenched Western assumptions about hierarchy and authority in international affairs. Furthermore, India's challenge to Western mindsets carries symbolic and practical implications for the broader international community. Many developing nations have long observed Western dominance as the default model for global engagement, often internalizing the belief that alignment with US or European policies is necessary for progress, stability, and recognition. India's assertiveness demonstrates an alternative path. A nation can engage with the world, maintain economic growth, pursue security, and assert sovereignty without capitulating to Western expectations. This inspires other nations to reconsider the assumptions that have historically governed global relations and to explore strategies of autonomy and independent decision-making. India's approach also underscores the value of strategic patience and measured responses in challenging prevailing mindsets. Unlike reactions fueled by emotion, aggression, or retaliation, a calculated, calm, and authoritative response forces observers to confront reality without the distraction of theatrics. Jaishankar's statement exemplifies this principle. It did not rely on insults, threats, or posturing, yet it was sufficiently strong to command attention and convey India's position unequivocally. This style not only challenges Western assumptions, but also elevates India's credibility, as it demonstrates that principled, sovereign decision-making can be more powerful than traditional forms of coercion or intimidation. The broader implication of India's challenge to Western mindsets is that it signals a more multipolar world. No single power, regardless of economic or military might, can assume automatic compliance or unquestioned authority. India's ability to resist pressure while maintaining global engagement exemplifies the shifting balance of influence and the increasing importance of respect, dialogue, and sovereignty in international relations. By challenging the old assumptions, India is not merely asserting its own position, it is reshaping the expectations of what emerging powers can achieve and how global leadership is defined. Ultimately, India's challenge to Western mindsets is both a reflection of its growing strength and a catalyst for redefining global diplomacy. By refusing to conform to outdated expectations, India demonstrates that the world is no longer a place where dominance guarantees obedience, and that respect, influence, and leadership are earned through independence, strategy, and principled action. India's rising global influence, as highlighted by Dr. S. Jaishankar's response to former President Trump, underscores a fundamental transformation in international power dynamics. For decades, the global order has been dominated by Western nations, particularly the United States, which have set the rules, dictated policies, and expected compliance from other countries. Nations that wish to engage in trade, defense, or diplomatic cooperation often had to align themselves with Western interests. India, historically viewed as a developing nation with limited influence, has steadily rewritten this narrative. Through strategic economic growth, military modernization, and diplomatic engagement, India has emerged as a decisive player whose voice carries weight in global discussions. Jaishankar's measured yet powerful statement is a reflection of this transformation, demonstrating that India is no longer a passive actor, but an active shaper of international affairs. The rise of India's global influence is multifaceted, encompassing economic, military, technological, and diplomatic spheres. Economically, India has become one of the fastest-growing major economies, attracting foreign investment, fostering innovation, and developing a massive consumer base. Its robust digital economy, thriving startup ecosystem, and domestic manufacturing initiatives have strengthened India's position in global markets, making it a nation that cannot be ignored by multinational corporations or global economic policymakers. This economic clout provides India with leverage in negotiations, allowing it to engage on equal footing with major powers and to assert its priorities in ways that were previously unimaginable. In the military sphere, India has enhanced its capabilities through indigenous programs and strategic acquisitions, building a defense infrastructure that ensures security while signaling strength to the world. Advanced missile systems, modern fighter aircraft, and a growing naval presence give India the ability to project power regionally and influence global security discussions. This military preparedness, combined with its strategic partnerships with other nations, ensures that India's voice is taken seriously on matters of defense, regional stability, and international conflict resolution. It demonstrates to the West and the world that India is capable of safeguarding its interests independently, further amplifying its global influence. Diplomatically, India has employed a careful balance of engagement and autonomy. By maintaining strong relations with the United States, European powers, Russia, and neighboring Asian countries, India has created a network of partnerships that enhances its leverage without becoming overly dependent on any single power. This approach allows India to act as a bridge between different geopolitical blocs and to participate in shaping decisions that affect not only its region but the world at large. Jaishankar's statement exemplifies this approach. It is firm, calculated, and strategic, signaling that India is a global actor whose opinions and actions influence outcomes on multiple fronts. India's rising influence also has symbolic importance. It represents the emergence of a nation that can balance tradition and modernity, maintain a democratic system, and achieve rapid development while preserving its sovereignty. This narrative resonates across the global South, inspiring other nations to consider alternative paths to development and international engagement that do not rely solely on Western approval. India's assertiveness challenges the established hierarchy and demonstrates that influence in the modern world is determined by a combination of strength, strategy, and credibility rather than mere historical dominance. Another dimension of India's influence is its ability to shape global discourse. By participating actively in forums such as the G20, BRICS, and the United Nations, India has become a voice that can influence policy, shape negotiations, and advocate for positions that reflect the interests of developing nations. This participation reinforces the perception that India is not merely a regional power, but a nation with global relevance, capable of shaping decisions on issues ranging from trade and climate change to security and technology. Ultimately, India's rising global influence, exemplified through Jaishankar's response, is a testament to the nation's strategic vision, resilience, and ability to engage the world on its own terms. It reflects a transformation from being a reactive participant in global affairs to becoming a decisive actor whose voice, choices, and actions significantly shape the international landscape. America's fear of India's strategic balance of power stems from the realization that India has mastered the art of engaging globally without compromising its sovereignty or independence. For decades, the United States operated under a framework where power dynamics were largely unipolar, allowing Washington to dictate terms, create alliances on its own terms, and influence the decisions of other nations. Countries were often expected to align with American interests, sometimes at the expense of their own priorities. India, however, has redefined this equation. Through careful diplomacy, robust economic growth, and military modernization, India has established a balance of power that allows it to cooperate with major global players while simultaneously pursuing its own strategic objectives. This ability to maintain autonomy while being a decisive participant on the world stage is precisely what unnerves the United States. India's strategic balance of power is evident in its foreign policy decisions, where pragmatism and national interest guide engagement rather than subservience to external pressures. A prime example is India's ability to maintain relationships with multiple major powers, including the United States, Russia, China, and key regional players without being forced into exclusive alliances. This multipolar approach allows India to extract benefits from its partnerships while minimizing risks associated with dependency on any single power. Then Washington, accustomed to influencing nations through alignment or coercion, finds this independence unsettling because it reduces its ability to control outcomes in regions where it once held near complete sway. Economic leverage is another dimension of India's strategic balance. India has grown into one of the fastest developing major economies, creating a market that attracts global investment and offers substantial bargaining power in trade negotiations. By diversifying its trading partners and exploring alternative financial and technological arrangements, India ensures that it does not rely exclusively on Western systems. This economic independence strengthens India's position globally, giving it the ability to make decisions that align with its long-term goals rather than yielding to external pressures. For the United States, India's growing economic self-reliance represents a reduction in leverage, creating a sense of unease in Washington's traditional approach to international relations. Military capability is a further pillar of India's balanced strategic power. India has invested heavily in modernizing its defense systems, including advanced missile programs, next-generation fighter aircraft, naval expansion, and cyber capabilities. These capabilities allow India not only to protect its sovereignty, but also to project power regionally and participate meaningfully in global security discussions. By combining military strength with diplomatic finesse, India demonstrates that it is capable of asserting influence without needing to rely on a single global power for protection or validation. This self-sufficiency in defense directly challenges the traditional Western expectation that emerging powers will remain dependent on US support for their security needs. India's approach also incorporates a nuanced understanding of global diplomacy, where respect and collaboration are earned through consistency and credibility rather than coercion. India engages in multilateral forums such as the G20, BRICS, and the United Nations with clear objectives, carefully balancing its relationships to maximize influence without compromising sovereignty. This strategic calculation makes India a reliable yet independent actor, able to shape outcomes while remaining true to its national priorities. The United States, which has often relied on a combination of pressure and incentives to influence other nations, views this independence as a threat to its traditional methods of maintaining global dominance. Furthermore, India's strategic balance of power has symbolic implications. It sends a message to the world that emerging nations can assert influence, negotiate from a position of strength, and achieve their goals without being subservient to established powers. This challenges the long-standing Western-centric worldview and inspires other nations to reconsider their own foreign policy approaches. India's ability to maintain this balance, assertive, autonomous, and strategically agile, is precisely why the United States feels apprehensive, because it signals a shift in the global order where compliance is no longer guaranteed and influence must be earned through respect, capability, and vision. Ultimately, America's fear of India's strategic balance of power reflects the realization that India is reshaping the rules of engagement in international affairs. By maintaining autonomy while effectively engaging globally, India has created a model of influence that is independent, principled, and formidable, challenging the traditional assumptions that have long underpinned US global dominance. India's symbolic assertion of strength, as highlighted by Dr. Jaishankar's chilling statement in response to former President Trump, represents one of the most profound indicators of its rising global stature. Symbolism in international relations is more than rhetoric. It conveys intent, confidence, and capability. For years, the West has operated under the assumption that its dominance was unchallenged and that emerging powers would follow a trajectory shaped by Western expectations. India's deliberate, calm, and authoritative response disrupts that assumption, sending a message that resonates far beyond the immediate political exchange. It demonstrates that India's power is not only tangible in terms of economy, military, and diplomacy, but also intangible in the form of global perception, respect, and influence. This symbolic strength is a critical component of why the West, including the United States, feels apprehensive. The symbolic weight of India's assertion lies in its ability to challenge long-standing hierarchies in the global order. Historically, nations were expected to accept instructions or pressure from more powerful states, often at the cost of their own priorities. India's statement represents a break from that pattern, embodying the principle that a nation can engage with the world on its own terms, without submission or apology. By calmly asserting its position, India signals to other countries, particularly those in the global south, that sovereignty and self-respect are not negotiable. This symbolism carries immense psychological and political impact, as it undermines the perception of Western inevitability and reinforces the notion that emerging powers can assert themselves credibly on the global stage. Symbolism also plays a strategic role in shaping global alliances and partnerships. When India asserts itself decisively, it inspires confidence among nations that seek to maintain autonomy while engaging in international cooperation. This, in turn, enhances India's soft power, making it a model for effective, principled, and independent leadership. And countries observing India's posture recognize that collaboration does not require subservience, and that influence can be exercised through strategy, credibility, and moral authority rather than coercion. The United States, accustomed to leveraging its position to maintain compliance, finds this shift unsettling because it represents a reduction in the effectiveness of traditional levers of influence. Furthermore, India's symbolic strength reinforces its credibility on practical matters. Statements like Jaishankar's are not merely verbal, they are backed by concrete actions in defense, trade, and diplomacy. India's ability to follow words with consistent policy decisions and tangible results amplifies the impact of its symbolic gestures. When a nation combines rhetoric with action, the world takes notice, and respect is earned rather than demanded. This dual approach, asserting sovereignty through clear messaging and reinforcing it through action, solidifies India's image as a confident, capable, and independent actor, making it increasingly difficult for the West to dismiss or underestimate its role. And India's symbolic assertion also affects domestic perception, which in turn strengthens its global position. Citizens witness their nation standing firm on the world stage, projecting confidence and authority without resorting to aggression or theatrics. This cultivates national pride, unity, and trust in leadership, which are essential for sustaining long-term strategic initiatives. A nation that demonstrates strength at home is better positioned to exercise influence abroad, and India's careful balancing of assertiveness and composure reinforces its image as a reliable, sovereign, and strategic power. The symbolism extends to the broader narrative of global multipolarity. By asserting itself effectively, India contributes to the shift away from a unipolar world dominated by Western powers. Its rise serves as a powerful example that respect and influence in international affairs are earned through capability, vision, and principle, rather than inherited through historical dominance. The Western world, particularly the United States, perceives this transformation as a challenge because it questions the established hierarchy and introduces a new standard for global engagement. Ultimately, India's symbolic assertion of strength demonstrates that its rise is not merely a function of economic growth or military capability, but also of perception, respect, and strategic messaging. By projecting confidence, sovereignty, and authority through carefully measured diplomacy, India signals to the world that it is a power to be reckoned with, one whose influence is grounded not in dominance or coercion, but in principle, consistency, and self-assuredness.